Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Connections podcast, where we talk about maintaining our relationships on Allah's terms. I'm your host, Fatma Qadri, here with my co-host, Dr. Fariha Khan. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Fariha, how are you?
Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, I'm doing fine. How are you, Fatma?
Alhamdulillah. So, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how sometimes we can take on too much and expect too much of ourselves and overburden ourselves with that. But I also wanted to talk about sometimes how we can take on too much to endure for ourselves and keep ourselves in a situation where we're trying to be patient for things that maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not expecting of us to do. So for example, if I'm in a situation where that is very difficult for me and I feel like the only solution is just to be patient and just to be patient, but sometimes it can be too much for me and it can be too much for me to endure, but we don't realize that perhaps there's a better solution out there. Perhaps, Allah wants me to navigate and problem solve instead of just settling in the situation that I'm in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, subhanallah. I mean, I think what you're saying is, what if you're in a situation where it really just seems like I can't handle it anymore, or like it's too much to bear, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that's really important to talk about because I've seen situations where we have, alhamdulillah, mercy of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the guidance of how to not just do our ibadah and like our worship and the rules of Islam. Don't eat this, don't, cover yourself like this. I mean, those are the rules of Islam. But aside from that, and as we talk about a lot at Silla, there are social obligations and our social duties, how to handle that is also laid out. Some sort of general rules and general paradigm is laid out by Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have these guidelines, and unfortunately, not everybody follows those guidelines. But there are some Muslims who are very particular, right? They really care about obeying Allah Subhanahu wa Taala and doing the right thing when it comes to their relationships. How to do their marriage, how to serve their spouse or their children or their parents, and while we might hear a lot of complaints about those who aren't doing their duties or who don't care about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded, there are a subsection of Muslims who, out of a sense of piety, they actually go out of their way to try and fulfill those duties. And sometimes what can happen is they sort of go overboard in that. They go overboard in how they are trying to fulfill their social duties. Am I making sense? Does that
Yeah,
relate to what you
yeah.
were saying?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when you do that, I remember as a grad student, there was this my advisor at U of M, Michigan. She was putting together this anthology of literature from Muslims in South Asia. Okay, it was this volume that came out from Princeton Press on Muslims, Islam in India. It was like this volume. You can find it online or whatever. And so what she was doing was, as editor of the volume, she was approaching different scholars of Islam in South Asia and asking them to select a passage or some kind of a piece of writing from any time in the history of Islam in India and translate it and like give a little critical introduction. And so the one I ended up choosing, she asked me to be a part of the volume, and the thing that I translated for it was this treatise, this like short article written by Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi, the person who I focused a lot on in my dissertation. He has this short risala called Ta'dil Huquq al-Walidain, which is balancing the rights of your parents. In that article, in that thing, he's saying, okay, well, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who do not give the right to their parents that they deserve, and that needs to be fixed, and we need to do our islah and like fix ourselves and improve our practice so that we are good to our parents and take care of them. But he said there are some people who they actually are really trying to fulfill the hukuk of their parents because it's a wajib, it's an obligation on them that you're supposed to take care of your parents, and they know this to be the case. But what they don't realize, Tanvi says, is there are other parties in the picture whose hukuk, whose rights you're supposed to balance as well. those parties are, of course, your parents are there, you have to take care of their hukuk, and then your spouse is there, and then your children are there, right? Everyone, these are like your obligatory social relations. Like these ones, you can't let them drop, right? Like you have to take care of all of these people. And he said, and there's another party that very few people realize is also a part of this picture, and that person is yourself. Can you believe that? That your
Um,
own nafs, that your own self has a haqq over you, just as the Prophet ﷺ said, that your nafs has a haqq, or a as a right over you. You have to take care of yourself. You can't just neglect yourself. And so when you are faced with a situation where it's become too difficult to bear, let's say in taking care of your parents, then you have to reevaluate and see, is there am I going overboard in trying to fulfill their obligation in places where I'm not actually obligated to obey them? Am I doing this in such a way that I'm hurting the right of my wife or my children or even myself? And you have to reevaluate the whole situation if it's become too difficult. I remember when I first read that treatise, I was like, this is unbelievable. I've never heard of anyone explain this issue in that way. And I mean, I think that we talk a lot about self-care these days. Like back when I was translating this I guess it was probably like 2005 or something when I translated that, right? I don't remember the phrases like self-care being really current. I mean, the idea was there and definitely in in our society, but that phrase wasn't there. But it's actually literally almost like what he's saying, like your nafs here, he means nafs as in yourself, like you're generally referring to you. Your nafs has the right over yourself, and you would translate that as you need to do some self-care, right? But I think like the idea behind that in our contemporary culture is like you need to put yourself first, or you need to make sure that, I don't know, like how do you think self-care is? There's an element of you come first that I sense in it, that
it
I
doesn't have to be like that though. Like it could just be like the self is cared for, you know?
you think.
Like, do you have time? Are you making time to meet your basic needs, like eating well, like getting in time to exercise, or your hygiene? So like even like young mothers, like, or if you're handling like the house, like in-laws, your kids, and you don't have time to shower or to just eat a meal in peace, and then you need to advocate for the fact that you need help.
Mm-hmm.
Or like a lot of times, like people, like I was talking to someone and she was just saying like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed and I don't have time. I forget to eat sometimes, and I
Whoa.
was like, well, why don't you arrange for a cleaning lady? Like you have the means. Why don't you arrange for someone to fold your kids' laundry? What's wrong with, like, if you have the means? What's wrong? And she was so like blown away by that. Like, why? But I'm home. Why would I? How would I even
Oh,
explain that to my
wow.
family? Like, and I really had to sit and convince her. Like, when you have little children, it's hard to keep up with the laundry. It's hard to keep up with the cleaning. Like, it's okay to, especially this is a family who has the means to outsource. But the only reason she wasn't outsourcing help for herself was just that. But how do I justify that I'm home and I'm not taking care of everything on my own?
As if it's her obligation, her religious obligation to take care of it all on
Yeah.
her own.
And
Or
it's like, but Allah has
yeah.
blessed you with the means and
Yeah.
access to help, and you're providing like income for somebody who desperately needs it. It seems like a win-win all around.
Mm-hmm.
But she
Mm-hmm.
just, and that's like a really common conversation with people who are in that circumstance where, okay, I'm working, but I'm not gonna hire help for
I'm
these
working?
little, no, like if somebody's working and they're like, they feel
Uh-huh.
bad that they're working, so they're not gonna hire a cleaning lady. But it's like, how much can you humanly, how much can you
Or even if you're
juggle?
not working though, right, Fatma? I mean,
Yeah,
like
not working.
the woman you were mentioning, was she a working mom?
I mean, I've encountered situations so many times, like with working women and not working women.
Right.
But like
Mm-hmm.
the other thing is also like, I think we had talked about this in the previous episode too. It's also like comparing yourself to other people, right? And like subconsciously, like if other women can be at home and manage their house and their laundry and their cooking, and then why can't I? Like, but everybody's different. Allah gave me 2 children. He gave my sister 4 children. He
And
knows
or maybe both of you have two children each, but they're very different kind of
the
children.
different kind of children, or
Yeah.
my somebody might be very swift with their housework. It's like it's their jam. They figure it out, they get it done, they know. But somebody else, it might be your talent, might be something else, and it's like you can't dwell on your differences and your shortcomings. Instead, like, I feel like Islam teaches you to be practical. Like, this is a lot, let me figure out what else I can do. It's not that,
Absolutely.
like the teenagers say, like, it's not that deep. Like, just
Mm-hmm.
get help, like get outsource or problem solve or ask your family for help.
Mm-hmm.
I once had a mom and she's like, has older children. And she's like, but they're studying. Like, I don't want to impose housework on them. And I'm like, that's like that's not gonna that's not even good for them to not
It's not good
help
for them
you.
to.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because how are they gonna figure all this stuff out later on in life?
I think it's also it has to do with this idea of what of how women's work was defined in how it's come to be defined in Western culture, as like she's associated with the home just like in Muslim culture, but because of the whole women's going out to work, that whole phase of contemporary history, once women became a really important part of the workplace, then it's like, oh, the woman who's at home, she's just doing nothing. It's
Yeah.
like she's not really doing any work. And so then the obligations that a woman has when she's at home they're diminished in importance, they're diminished in terms of like how much she actually has to put in. And so when she is then in need of support there, even if she is someone staying at home, or even if she's working, but definitely if she's staying at home, if she needs some kind of like domestic help or something, she's made to feel as if she's so spoiled, and she's already spoiled. She doesn't have to work. She's just sitting at home and somebody else is taking care of you. It's like somehow she's like really spoiled by her husband or something. And then on top of that, you're going to get a cleaning lady. Like you're so useless, and I don't know if people, those who are in the situation of being women at home, once you're at home, there's a whole other universe of responsibilities that opens up.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
because you have unstructured time, and so there are responsibilities that you might be caring for, outside of just your four walls. You might be looking out for other people in your family, taking care of elders or doing other kinds of tasks. And even if you're not taking care of those little ones with the really full attention, takes a lot of work. I mean, I'm actually really grateful to one of my women teachers who she made it very clear to us that if you have the means, you should get help at home so that you can use your time for other things, whether that's, really spending time with your children and on their tarbiyah, or, on some other good work that you could do, or some hobby that you could do, or religious study that you could do, and even like giving time to your spouse, that requires you to sort of be present and not exhausted.
And even like with age, like you're gonna need help. Like you might not be able to handle what you handled in your 20s, in your 30s, or
Mm,
your 40s. Like you will progressively
absolutely.
decline in your energy.
Mm-hmm.
I like, so as a teacher, like much of my social circle is teachers. Like most of my friends are also educators. So we're home those 3 months of the summer, and those are the busiest months for us in the entire year where we're home. And we don't see each other, we barely talk because everybody's so consumed by their home life.
Mm-hmm. Like in
Whereas
what
like,
sense? What changes that you're more busy in the summertime when you're not working?
I
Rationally, that
think,
doesn't make sense, but I believe
well,
you. I'm just wondering.
part of it is you're probably catching up on like the bigger tasks of the house, like the organization, this, that, and then you're also
Mm-hmm.
giving more time to other responsibilities that perhaps like throughout the year you don't as much, like visiting relatives or helping, or the kids are home, so like keeping them occupied, and or like making
Yeah,
I don't even know myself, but I just know that being at home sometimes can be even harder than, it's like your time is not idle. Like you're not idle. Like there's always
never.
something
Mm-hmm.
to do. There's always, maybe you have like, we end up like having more expectations of ourselves when we're at home too.
Mm-hmm.
But no one who stays home or is a stay home person like is just wasting their time or withering away. They're always occupied with something productive, in my experience from people that I know.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to your point about when things get overly challenging, I think that was a really good example that you raised about just it doesn't have to be like a'udhu billah, like a life or death situation, but if you're in a situation where things are just really hard and you have the ability to loosen that or to ease it for yourself, then you should by every like you should try to alleviate the difficulty. And I think this idea of kind of like being the martyr, of like, I am carrying, I do it all myself. I do all the cleaning myself and all of the food myself and all of the children myself and every single thing myself. I mean, there's a place for that. I think it's really good to have, and I think it is a valuable thing that you're adding, definitely, if a woman is adding this or a man is adding this, where they're really taking care to put in the time to do things well within their home. But at some point, I've noticed this in different situations, different kinds of situations where the person is just physically not doing well then, or something else is not doing well. Maybe they're not able to give so much time to their spouse, or like even have time themselves with their spouse. Maybe they themselves might want to have more time with their spouse, but they just can't manage to get that time in. And, it's interesting because, there's like, sometimes that can get really, really difficult. Where I remember there was like this one situation that I had encountered some years ago where there was this older couple, and the woman, both of them were in their 60s, and then they were caring for the man's elderly mother as well. And she was probably like in her late 80s or something. I mean, she was very old, and they were already now getting into their aging process, and they were in their 60s. And they had like so many challenges. I mean, the man had started developing certain mental conditions. He was not able to take care of himself, even work. So this woman, in her 60s, she's working full time. They're coming home, trying to take care of her spouse and the house and taking care of all of that. Plus, she has her invalid, oh, not invalid, but I think it was like she wasn't able the her mother-in-law wasn't able to bathe herself, was having a harder and harder time going to the bathroom by herself, and there was no one really to help. And in that situation, eventually the woman had someone ask a scholar on her behalf, like, is this situation okay? I mean, like, I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm at my wit's end. I have to take care of my husband. I have to take care of my mother-in-law. I have to go to work. I think I'm gonna like lose it. And he was like, no, this is an untenable situation. And he said, he actually referenced this verse in the Quran, the verse in Surah Baqarah, la yukallifullahu nafsan illa wusaha, that Allah doesn't burden with a soul more than what it can bear. He referenced that ayah, and he was like, if you're carrying so much that it's become too much to bear, then that means there's another way for you to do this. There's another Sharia countenanced option, an alternative or something that you could take rather than the obligations you put on yourself, but you're not taking that. And that fits with the tafsir of this verse, because the verse was revealed as a way for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve the Sahaba, because they had heard a different verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, you're going to be accountable for what you hide, and the Sahaba, what is apparent of yours and what is hidden of yours, you're going to be accountable for all of it, right? And when they heard that verse paraphrased, I just paraphrased that verse. The Sahaba were really worried that they're going to be held accountable for the thoughts that they have. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, you're only accountable for what you can handle, right? I'm only going to obligate for you. I'm only going to religiously require you to do that which you are able to. Nobody's going to ask you to do 80 prayers a day. Nobody's going to ask you to do a hajj every year. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't put that on us as an obligation, because it's too much to bear. And similarly, in our social duties too, you're not required to do more than what you can bear religiously. So if you are in a situation where you're carrying too much social obligation and you feel like you're just going to lose it, that means you've put it on your plate. Allah did not put that on your plate. I found that his way of explaining it very, very relieving. Like over the years, I've like remembered his way of explaining that in many situations.
So, how did the family resolve the situation?
What they ended up doing, actually, well, I mean, religiously, she technically wasn't obligated to be caring for her mother-in-law, right? That's not her fard. It's her husband's wajib, and he was incapable. He was, because of his health issues, he was unable to take care of himself, let alone his mother. And so what ended up happening, when that woman heard the explanation of the sheikh, she was like, what other option is there? There's no option. There's no alternative. But then as she started thinking about it, and she started consulting other people in the family who were like, able to help her figure things out, they realized right next to that house where these people lived, there was a care home, like a nursing home, where the elder grandmother, the mother-in-law, she could be moved to that facility and taken care of over there so that her basic obligation was being taken care of. And that was, I remember hearing about that situation and how difficult it was on that family because it was something they had avoided doing that for many, many years, even as that
There's also
older.
that stigma of like a nursing home and all
Yeah, I
in
mean
the
it's a stigma,
community.
but because for good reason, right? Like I mean, it
Yeah,
is of course coming better for a person, whoever the person, if they can be cared for at home, if they're ill, if they're aging, if they're ailing with anything. Obviously, the ideal situation is if the person is in their own home, surrounded by their family. But that's not always available as an option for everyone. And so, having the person cared for in the nursing home is not haram in the Sharia. It's not the ideal, but it's not the haram. But being at home with all of these obligations to the point where your own health is suffering, you might end up dying from a heart attack because you can't handle it, and then everyone's gonna suffer, right? That
yeah.
probably is haram,
See, that's the irony of neglecting self care is that you neglecting self care in the end hurts everybody around you more,
Hmm. Hmm.
because when you are not like emotionally like either you can go into a space of bitterness, or your health can deteriorate, or you can. There's so many there's so many things that can impact you when you're not taking care of yourself. That in the end, the people around you will also be affected by that.
I think as a
Like,
believer, the thing that you have to protect yourself most from is the bitterness that you mentioned. That's a real factor. It's a really dangerous factor. I've seen in people who have, a lot of struggle and a lot of difficulties. I know another family who's a very similar situation. They have two children who are special needs, right? Like basically they're handicapped. They can't take care of themselves. And those children have grown into adulthood. They're still unable to take care of themselves. And, the mother and the parents are like getting into their own health issues as they're starting to age. And it's becoming too hard to bear. Like it literally is becoming too hard to bear. And I always wish that they could understand that it's okay for you to get more help with your children. You might need to have put them in a facility where they can be cared for better than what you can yourself. Now that you're in your 50s, you can barely lift your child anymore. How are you doing everything by yourself? And, there's a lot of bitterness, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of frustration at their situation, and a lot of fear about what's going to happen, in the future. And I remember I had mentioned this situation to one of my teachers to try and see if I could help that family. And my teacher was just like, you can't carry you have to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's going to take care of it in the end. And if you try to just fix everything and carry everything, she didn't diminish the difficulty. She said this is an extremely difficult situation. And the family has to make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes it towards what is better and gives them a way out. But I think sometimes we have these ideas about what we're obligated to do, that we assume we're obligated to do them, and there might be other options around, and we just don't even want to consider that, and we're hurting ourselves. We're hurting our relationship with Allah. We start to wonder why He doesn't care about me. Why doesn't He take care of this? Why did He make things so difficult? And I think that bitterness is the most dangerous part of it, is it can hurt your akhirah. I mean, this dunya is fading, right? It's going to be gone. 10 years, 20 years, it's finished, right? 30 years. But then how are we going to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the anger and the bitterness that we had? And when He says, well, this option was there for you and this option was there for you, and why didn't you do it? I didn't say you couldn't do it. How are we going to answer? I mean, it's easier said than done. I'm saying this, these are really challenging situations, but I see the same thing in sometimes certain marriages. You'll see the person just keep slugging through it, keep slugging through it, and it's like, yes, you do have to work at your marriage, and yes, we do want our marriages to survive and our children to be in two-parent homes, but divorce is a halal option. The Prophet ﷺ said it's the most hated of the halal, but it's a halal option. Just like a nursing home might not be the option that none of us like. It might be a hated option, but it's a halal option that was there for that family, and it actually relieved them a lot. Allowed her, for instance, to be spend more time with her son. Like he was able to go. I remember, like they had said that he could now go visit her all the time, and he wasn't stressed out. When he was well, he could sit with her. Anyways, may Allah
Yeah.
help us. Yeah.
I think also sometimes we like take on things that are not necessarily under our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
For example, like if you're a very caring person, you're a compassionate person, you might be problem solving like for your issues your friend is going through, your siblings, families are going through, etc. And at some point, you just have to realize that you can't fix everybody's problems. You
Oh
can't
yeah.
take on
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
Sometimes you have to leave that doesn't concern you, or leave the problems of those who are not your flock necessarily.
Mm-hmm. You're referring to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where everyone's responsible for their flock. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
can, I mean, hypothetically, like I can love my siblings' children's and I can love their families, but it's not my job to manage their things or my friends. Like I can care very deeply about my friend, but it's not my job to fix the problems in her home. Like to take
Mm-hmm.
on emotional stress. Like I have a friend who was really like I saw her somewhere and she looked extremely like drained and distraught and I was like, "Are you okay? Like you don't look well. Like is something going on?" And she was extremely short, like she was getting upset quickly. And so I was like, "Are you okay? Like did you know like is everything all right?" And she said, "I have a friend who's going through divorce and every day she's calling me and she's like venting to me and it's taking a lot out of me, you know?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, but
Alhamdulillah.
you're not, it's not your job to be her. It sounds mean, but it's not your job to be her therapist or, you know, like the mediator, the arbitrator in the situation. That's not something that you're equipped to do, nor should you expect that you need to do that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think you brought up a really important other principle with that we learned from the Prophet ﷺ, which is to leave that which doesn't concern you. And I completely agree with you. I mean, I think that those of us who are really like empathetic type personalities where we really feel for other people, sometimes we can get really caught up in their challenges and their difficulties, feel it, at a very, very deep level. And what ends up happening is you're right. Like you carry that pain with you all the time. You carry that stress with you all the time, the confusion with you all the time. And then you're carrying those feelings into your home, into your relationship with your spouse, into your relationship with your kids. You can't just like relax and like sit and just chit chat with your own children, like play with them, have fun with them, joke around with your spouse. It's like I've sometimes I've even almost experienced this myself where like I'm really, really upset about something that's happening to someone else. And then, my husband would be talking to me about something lighthearted and I'll just be looking at him like, how can you smile? Like, how can you
Yeah,
laugh? And it's just like,
I'm not in
and then
that mental space. Yeah,
yeah, I'm just looking at him like as if he's some kind of an alien. And then you have to sort of make yourself snap out of that. It's like, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you this place to take care of, these people to take care of, and he's allowed you a time and a period where you can be happy and you can be relaxed. So be grateful for that and do it. And that doesn't mean you just ignore, na'udhu billah, like you don't ignore the people around you. You do when you can, you're able, you do give support, emotional, physical, and monetary, otherwise.
yeah. I
But you
mean,
can't do that to the detriment of your fara'id. And your fara'id is as that person I quoted at the beginning of the talk, I mean at the beginning of our podcast, the fara'id are your spouse, your children, your parents, yourself, you know?
yeah. I mean, part
Um,
of self care is being self aware and knowing what you can and cannot handle. You know, like
yeah.
and being able to say like, okay, I care deeply for you, but I think now it's time that you sought help in through a different avenue. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you
yeah,
and we talked about this in that how we make things complicated episode. And I agree with you, but I maybe for some reason that principle of you have to be self-aware in order to do self-care, it doesn't really work for me as well. As what works is knowing what Allah wants from me. That helps me more. And sometimes you don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you. Like it looks really confusing. Like that situation with the woman who's caring for her husband and her mother-in-law. Or the woman, the parents who are caring for two handicapped kids. It's like it's really hard. It's really, really hard to know exactly what needs to be done. And you sort of lose yourself when you're in those situations. You kind of lose sense of yourself too. Like you don't really it's really hard to know what can I bear, what can I not bear. Am I just being annoyed? Am I being, it's because there are people out there who just say, oh, I can't take it, and it's actually not that much to bear, right? Where they'll,
yeah,
well, they'll shirk their responsibilities just because they don't want to, and they just say, oh, I can't handle it. And so how do you, I think a better criteria for myself at least is not necessarily knowing myself, because I think yourself can be tricky and it can trick you, the tricky nuffs, rather
Yeah.
than that is like, okay, figure out what does Allah want from me, and if I don't know what Allah wants from me, fas'alu ahla dhikri in kuntum la ta'lamun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, like, ask the people who know if you don't. And so go to as good of a scholar as you can find, someone who's really well trained, someone who's really wise, who has, very good personal integrity and religious practice himself, who has wide experience in the community. Try to find whoever you can, whoever above you that you can find, even if it's not super sheikh, but it's just someone wiser, someone who knows better. And there's barakah in that. There's barakah in following the hukm of Allah and asking, what do you think I should do in this situation? There's a very big barakah in that, because I can't take it anymore. And then they'll tell you, maybe this, try that. And from that, when you ask the ulama, you'll get an idea of what Allah wants from you. And even from just asking good people, good-hearted people who are righteous in their own lives and their practices, you'll get a sense of it too. Even if it might not be like a definitive Sharia rule, you'll get more of a sense of what is it that Allah wants. I think that's why it's sunnah to consult. It's not just sunnah to make istikhara when you're trying to make a decision about things, right?
Yes, I've found this to be very beneficial too. That just asking somebody who's first and foremost a scholar or a learned person, but also like an elder in your family, like seeking mashwara from your elders and people with more life experience. It
Yeah.
can really surprise you, like of how much wisdom you can acquire and by just asking someone for help or
And then
talking
they
it
can,
out with someone.
yeah, and because they're outsiders, people with wisdom and they're outsiders, they can kind of cut through the miasma that you're sort of plugging through, like the
Yeah,
cloudiness of your
and see it
situation,
with
because
more
you're,
clarity.
yeah. And they'll just be like, wait, but why not? How about this? And you're just like, oh, I didn't think of that. I
And it's
mean,
also like a way to check yourself too, right? Like if you're not, if you're, if we're our intention is for Allah, then you want to go to those who are interpreting His law for us, or who have a deeper understanding of His Deen, so
yeah.
you can understand your role better.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in some of these most difficult situations, it's the ulama of piety essentially, who have insight and who have experience, life experience,
Mm.
community experience. It's such a source of relief when you talk to such people, because what seemed completely unbearable and unsolvable, they have an insight and they can see, because of the light of the Quran and Sunnah and the Deen, they can see things that you and I might not be able to see, and they'll just, very dark situations, sometimes they'll put light on it, and you'll be able to go through much better than you ever could have before. So alhamdulillah. But Jazakallah khair, Fatma. This was really useful for me too, to help to talk this out with you. Jazakumullah
So,
khair.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Thank you for joining us today on the Connections podcast. To stay updated on the work we do at the Silla Initiative, sign up for our newsletter at the bottom of our homepage at thesillainitiative.org. You can also subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Telegram, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.